Gratitude to all three consul generals for giving me this opportunity to be in the company of such exceptional scholars. I think some of part of this answer, this question has already been addressed by our panelists, but let me just kind of emphasize on some of the remarks that were made earlier on the definition of Islamophobia and its prognosis and historical origins. I think it is largely a political project in the world that we live in. It's whether we call it ideological or whatever it's historical. You talked about the medieval history, and even before that. I think the Islamophobia that we are witnessing is very much rooted in the contemporary global order and the way imbalance of power is distributed across the world. So I think before I go on to the manifestations, I would like to make a point on, the Imam mentioned Islamophobia in the US, where we are. So I'll start from there. I think the spike or the intensity of prejudice, fear, harassment, fear of Muslims came in the wake of 9/11 attacks. Unfortunate and tragic as they were, they became a major impetus globally in the United States as well as Europe in sort of underwriting a large military project. And given the domestic politics and power relations within the US, the military-industrial complex, as President Eisenhower called that system, found it the most opportune way of putting in state resources into war projects across the globe. So thus far, in 20 years or so, according to the Brown University Costs of War project, the United States has spent more than $8 trillion in 2 decades on the global warfare, be it Afghanistan, be it Iraq, Syria, Libya, you name it, resulting in almost 3 to 4 million deaths across these places, of mostly civilians, mostly non-combatants, serious war crimes, which remain unfortunately unchecked, unpunished, because sometimes they had some sanction or a dubious sanction of either the UN or the way the media systems operate, they keep on. So part of this is rise in Islamophobia is also linked to the mechanics of the military-industrial complex. And I think part of the funding that Imam mentioned, about $1 billion plus into hate organizations. I mean, there's also a report by Berkeley, just in 4 years, I think from 2016 to 2020, more than $25 million were poured into 33 hate organizations tasked with the mission to spread hatred for Muslims and otherizing of Muslim populations, both in the European and American context, but also globally, because that kind of provides a justification of the war machinery that we have seen in operation. And I think that is perhaps the economic underpinnings of this large Islamophobic industrial complex, if I may call it that. Now, what are its manifestations we are seeing? Well, I mean, if I go over regionally, I mean, we know what has happened in the US. So CARE again has documented that since October 7, they received about 3,000 or more than 3,000 complaints of Islamophobic, hate speech, attacks, intimidation just in the US. And mind you, these are more than the complaints filed under Trump administration, when we all thought that Trump was anti-Muslim, he was putting in the Muslim ban, etc. This is 3 times more. And this is from their data that they have tabulated. Same goes for what is happening in Europe, because now this is a second moment. October 7, unfortunately, has proved to be a second moment of a spike in Islamophobic narratives, toxic ideologies that are now being used, normalized through mainstream media, as Imam mentioned, where he was interviewed in the CNN, that's a norm. I mean, they would have a person rant about Muslims and Islam, totally ill-informed, ignorant almost, but not give voice to those who actually are Muslims. And this otherization then, as was mentioned in the first speech, kind of puts a blanket identity that all 1.2 or 1.3 Muslims, 1.3 billion Muslims across the world are the same. They think the same way, they dress the same way, they are violent, scratch the surface, etc., etc. Because these are all tropes used to undermine the population. I mean, I've talked much about the US, but look at Europe. I mean, Hungary. Hungary is a great case. 0.04% population Muslim, and Orban uses anti-Muslim rhetoric almost in every speech, in every political rally, against 0.04% of the population, that they're a threat to the entire Hungarian country. Then he made a remark that Bosnians cannot be integrated into the European Union because it's 2 million Muslims. How can they be integrated into EU? So you have this kind of date, and in the UK we have Conservative Party ruling. Their ministers have been making wild Islamophobic attacks against the Muslim communities. They've been encouraging that sort of hate speech. And then we go to South Asia, where I think Myanmar was already mentioned. We've just seen, it's a recent history, it's not ancient history, that a whole population of Rohingyas has been expelled from the country due to their religious identity. And if we look at Sri Lanka, which is a majority Buddhist country, and it is ironical that Lord Buddha, who was the biggest sort of proponent of peace, tolerance, and love, his followers in Sri Lanka have used his or misused his teachings to expel and attack Muslims in a small, beautiful island country. And then come to India, world's most populous, influential, rising regional power, and its ruling party, its political mission is to cleanse India of all Muslims. Its leaders, including the Prime Minister, its ministers, its so-called intellectuals, have articulated such thoughts. And again, it's rooted in the domestic politics of India, because it's a power grab, power capture, so it's a very convenient and very attractive trope to use Muslims as an excuse. And I just want to make two more quick points. I think one of this, so alongside this war military-industrial complex, Euro-Atlantic, rolling out all these trillions of dollars into defense expenditures and occupation of countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, the two most useless wars in our lifetimes we have witnessed, with no results. In fact, they have destroyed those countries, and there's no accountability. And unfortunately, that is also what I want to highlight, is also the problems within the United Nations system and its structure, the way it is designed, is that it kind of perpetuates the power imbalance through, let's say, the Security Council to begin with, but also the non-compliance of many UN conventions and treaties. And I will not go into the Security Council because that's an intensely political, contentious debate, but let's take two important UN conventions that I teach now. One is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, which clearly highlights, and because our professor and most scholars have now agreed that Islamophobia is actually a racist ideology. And that UN convention has been signed by almost all countries of the world. Maybe one or two exceptions may not be there. The US is a signatory to it. Most European nations have signed it. And it says that there can be no room for hate speech or incitement to violence. Yet, in the United States, in many parts of Europe, it continues unabated against Muslims. The second convention I would like to highlight is the Convention Against Genocide. Because a genocide does not really take place when people are actually murdered, but the hate speech or the early warning signs, the different stages of genocide. And we have seen that happening in Myanmar. We are witnessing history in Gaza, what is happening. That is nothing short of a genocide by all accounts, and it is part of international law. So and there are many other treaties as well, but I'm highlighting these two because international law does provide a way forward in at least addressing some of the key challenges of Islamophobia in our times. And yet its weak implementation, its subversion by the powerful actors in the global international order is the problem that we have to find out. And of course, as Imam says, it is the Muslims who have to act up. Muslim countries like Indonesia, the most populous Muslim country, Muslim majority country, Pakistan, Türkiye, and others, they have to rise to the occasion. If there is Western media, dominance of an anti-Muslim, anti-Islam narrative, then what stops us? We can't just throw all the weight on Al Jazeera to argue for it. I mean, it has just been banned by Israel. So, I mean, the only democracy, quote unquote, in the Middle East. And they're completely banned. And in fact, yesterday they arrested somebody on the suspicion of a local journalist, on the suspicion of working with Al Jazeera. It is the most egregious sort of a charge. So I think what stops Muslim countries from putting together that counter information outflow? I think what stops us from countering the hate propelled by these large social media companies like Google and Meta and Twitter, etc., who allow these right-wing extremist, anti-Muslim, anti-Islam narratives to flourish. We have resources, we have the best minds, we have a rich legacy from the Ottoman Empire, from the Spanish thinkers, from the other, in Pakistan, in Indonesia, in Malaysia. I mean, you name it. There's no shortage of that. I think the problem is that Muslims themselves are in a disarray. And I think the very important point that was mentioned by Imam is that what we do in the Muslim majority countries as well, we must remember that in this age of globalization, we are also under scrutiny. So whatever happens in Jakarta, Islamabad, or Istanbul, or Kuala Lumpur, is also under global scrutiny. So we have to be we have to set examples by treating our non-Muslim brothers and sisters in a manner that the world, by which we set an example. I think that's something that is of utmost importance. And then, of course, we can talk later, because at a theoretical level, and one can have a whole day seminar on that, our religion and our religious tradition also gives us the power of ijtihad, using our intellect to interpret today's problems, complex issues, by reasoning, by logical reasoning, using our divine texts and not being bound by the 13th or 14th century interpretations that we think are final. Ijtihad, ijma, it is mentioned in the Holy Book, it is mentioned in the jurisprudence, it is mentioned in the hadith, I mean, you name it. But we shy away from using it. We tend to adhere to these really fossilized interpretations, man-made, human-made interpretations of us, a millennia old. So we also have to do a bit of introspection as to what is happening while we rise up, while we unite, organize, rethink how we are going to place ourselves in the 21st century. We must also do some soul searching within Muslim majority countries as to where we may have gone wrong and what we need to fix within our homes. I'll stop.
These are, as you can all tell,